On a call last week, one of my college guys told me one of the best compliments I think you can get as a coach. He was walking me through what his coach said in his exit interview, and he said that his coach said to him, whatever it is that you did last summer, double down on that again. And that fired me up because now I get to build him a plan that helps him execute exactly that again. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I think about building off-season programs. Not necessarily the workouts, but the philosophy and the thought process that goes in behind the actual training sessions that are delivered. Because if you understand the why, you can build a plan that actually moves the needle rather than just training for the sake of training. So the philosophy behind the plan, it all starts with the timeline. So back calculate from the rough date of when you're going to camp. Because your camp dictates your calendar. That's when you need to peak, when you need to be the most prepared. Now there's some nuance to that because it depends on what kind of camp you have. Is your main camp a tryout or is it just the first time you're skating as a team, right? Because how junior differs from college, where college camp starts in August, the season doesn't start till October. But junior camp starts in August, season starts in September, you're very much likely fighting for a spot. So you want to be at your absolute best. Whereas with college, you want to be prepared, but you still have quite a bit of a runway before the actual season starts. So the timeline for this athlete, camp, third week of August, working backwards, time of filming is roughly the beginning of May. So I like to split things into 4 to 6 week cycles with a different priority for each cycle. Now, with our timeline here, we've got roughly 3 cycles that we can focus on. So once I have those cycles and sort of each sort of priority that we're really working towards based on our call, based on the things that we covered, we now know that phase 1 is purely strength. Phase 2, strength is still a priority. Speed becomes the focus. And then phase 3 is almost exclusively speed and conditioning. Now, the reason for this, specific to this athlete, he's a well-trained individual. He's been in the gym a lot. He's very strong. His priorities are that he wants to be faster, more explosive, quicker 3 strides. Sound familiar? So it's important that we prioritize the outcome. And what he told me on the call, like I said, he's already strong. He wants to be faster and more explosive. And to achieve that, he thinks he needs to do more field days, which I agree with. So as we're building out this plan, you'll notice that we go from the full macro of the entire off season, chunked down into phases, which have individual priorities, chunked down into weeks, and in terms of progression, right down into structures for training, individual training sessions, and then exercise selection from there. So you'll see as it gets more and more specific how the plan comes together. So with phase 1, strength is a priority. And the reason I always have some form of GPP or like general preparatory phase is because we spend 10 to 11 months often focused all on hockey. How can I be a better hockey athlete? How can I be quicker, faster, stronger, more powerful? So it's nice to dial that back for one part of the year and focus only on getting stronger. I find, especially with the athletes that I work with, it helps them take their mind off hockey while maintaining good habits and building good strength, which makes them, unironically, better at hockey in the future. So it's important that we do take some time where we're not training like hockey players and we are really just trying to become the most strong person that we can. And then we can use that strength and apply it into the applications that we need for our sport. I also have in here prepping tissues for sprints. And the reason that I like to put that in there is even though we're doing mostly strength for the first phase, we know that more sprint and speed work is coming. So I don't want to just throw it all by the wayside. I want to maintain it a little bit and use the accessory work in the strength phase to prepare the athlete for the speed-focused phases. And to do that, we want to prevent injuries before they happen. prehab, call it. So a lot of injuries for sprinting come in hamstrings. We get a lot of soreness when we start skating again in the hip flexors. Groins or adductors, commonplace for injury. So this is the time where we can really prioritize some accessory strength around those areas. And then two, shin splints are common with increased volume sprints. So we want to put in part of our program to prevent shin splints, to build strength against that. And then two, I always think that it's a good time to rehab our shoulders. And I know that I'm not really following the slides here, but these are things that I find that are very important, because healthy, strong shoulders in wide ranges of motion can prevent many injuries in the off season and in season. And it can accelerate your training, because when you think about it, it's very hard to continue to maintain and progress when you're set back 6 weeks because you have to rehab a shoulder injury, or even like you're scared to go in the corners because you're afraid you might get hurt again, right? And it affects all of those things down the line. So now is the time. Let's rebuild everything that we can. Our shoulders, our hips. Give ourselves strong joints and stable joints to last another season. This is the time for that phase one. With how I like to program, this is getting into week to week. I like to follow the high-low method. So starting from it's based on our CNS, central nervous system. Alternating high days and low days so that we're not constantly trying to exert maximal effort when we don't have maximal capacity from our CNS. So it alternates high day, low day, repeat. So you never have 2 high days back to back. And the reason for that, or how to do that, throughout the week, is I like high day Monday, low day Tuesday, off day Wednesday, high day Thursday, low day Friday, high day Saturday, off day Sunday. So you get 2 days off a week. I like to have them split rather than stacked, because 2 days off in a row is not that bad. 5 days of training in a row can get pretty challenging. And then when you look at your high days, Monday, Thursday, Saturday with this schedule, you either have just had a day off before your high day, or you have your next day off after a high day. So psychologically, it helps you push more when you either know you're just coming off of a rest or know a rest is just on the horizon. Now we're going to go from weekly sessions right down into how to plan individual sessions. Strong warm-up, non-negotiable. What I mean by that is loosen the joints, warm up the muscles, prep your brain, central nervous system, so that you are ready for exercise, intense exercise. Right? You know the feeling after you have like a good hard warm-up, you're out of breath, you got a sweat going, you're like, now I'm in it. We want to mimic that every single time. After that, I like to get into speed work, because that is when you are the most fresh. If you're trying to improve your 100%, if your 100% is the fastest you can go and you want to make that faster, it makes sense that you train from that 100%. Right? You don't want to wait till you're at 40% and then try and get faster. It's not going to work. From speed to power, because power still has an element of speed. Power is strength times speed, roughly. And then we get into our strength, accessory work, conditioning. Reason being that I put accessories at the end is because once you're fatigued more, you're not going to be lifting as heavy weights, you're not going to be working as large muscle groups. So accessory work still fits in there because you're already going to be fatigued from the things that you've done prior. And then conditioning work, usually because conditioning in itself is mental training as much as it is physical training. The ability to keep going under fatigue. So we want to fatigue ourselves with our other priorities in training first before we get to conditioning. And then when we think about it, after we do our conditioning, we're not really going to have capacity for anything else. Like imagine doing your conditioning session and then trying to set a 40-yard dash record. It's not going to happen. That's a little bit about how I go into the session order. Now, the rule, just to make all of that easier to remember, fresh nervous system first, then load, then grind. And it's just an easy sort of little moniker, like fresh first, load, grind, to think about how we work in our training or how we work through our training. Now, progression. This is very important. I think it's under-addressed by many coaches, is progressing conservatively. The philosophy that I like is, and I try to impose on my athletes, is start lighter than you want to, progress slower than you can. And how that actually looks on paper is about 5 to 10% volume per week maximum. And it's going to be even lower if you are a well-trained individual. Because if we think about it, if we're doing 10% a week every week for 52 weeks, the span of 1 year, that's 520%, not factoring in compounding. And when we think about that, it is almost impossible to be lifting more than 5 times as much in total volume a year from now. So 10% sounds small on paper, and it might be 10% in the early weeks, but overall, it's going to get closer to 5 and sometimes even lower. And that's not a bad thing. That's what keeps you progressing without dipping too far into the range of injury risk. Of course, like anything you do, if you are trying to make progress physically, you run the risk of injury. But we, as coaches, trainers, we want to mitigate that injury risk as much as we can while maintaining the progression. So that's why I like to do 5 to 10% volume per week max. Now, accessories, again, I already explained this quite a bit, but always thinking one phase ahead. So even if we're doing a GPP, like a general phase, what's coming in phase 2 that we need to get ready for, right? So a lot of sprinting. So we want to prehab the sprint work so when we start, we don't get injured. So hamstrings, adductors, hip flexors, avoiding shin splints, and then shoulders. Again, touched on this already, but being strong, mobile, and resilient in wide ranges of motion, because the last thing we want to do is be trying to recover 6 weeks on the IR. Of course, injuries happen, but if we can prevent it from a training perspective, we want to aim to do that. So just as a quick recap, the philosophy that goes into these programs that I build is I start with the timeline. When do you have camps? And reverse engineer from there. Pick the priority. What are you focused on when you want to get ready for camp? What are the things that you're thinking about? Do you want to be faster? Do you want to be stronger? Are you running out of gas? Do you want to be better conditioned? What are you really thinking about? Using the high-low method to alternate CNS output, so high-low off, high-low high off, or however many days you're training in a week. Ordering the session right, so warm-up, speed, power, strength, accessories, conditioning. And then with pairing the exercises smart, antagonist muscle groups with, if there's one exercise that requires a lot of setup, we don't want to pair it with something else that also requires a lot of setup or different setup. So I always like doing setup plus minimalist. And then varying the stimulus. This is where we can go through similar plans and swap exercises. And this isn't something that we do week to week. Like this might be phase to phase. But it can help us continue to progress without really having to readapt to completely new movement patterns. And then progressing conservatively, just covered this, where progress slower than you want to. Start lighter than you want to, progress slower than you can. If you are consistent, the progress will come. Trying to do too much at once puts you in the red zone for injury risk. I think that's why it's hard to be patient, but being patient and consistent is a fast track to growth, right? Shortcuts, cut short, long runs. When you're adding more and more weight to the bar, it's okay to add 5s. It's okay to add 2.5s. And the more you train, the more common that will become, right? Like don't just go and squat 135 and then 185 and then 225 and use those as your only metrics for growth. Like you can go from 225 to 230 to 235. That's progress. And then prep for what's coming next. So when you're thinking about your accessory work, your prep work, think about the next phase, think about what's coming, especially if you're getting into more sprinting or if you're going to be going harder and getting into camp. That's where the preparatory phases really start to have importance. To wrap things up, a lot goes into planning out training plans for athletes. It is not simply something that really comes from ChatGPT or AI or like your buddy's paper training plan or your local trainer. A lot of thought goes into these plans that we make, and when you do them, they work. I hope you've got a lot of value from this. If you want to take it, steal it, use this philosophy to try and build your own plans, absolutely. If that sounds like a lot of work, you're like, I don't actually want to do this. This is way too much for me to take on. I've got something very special for you. I will give you this training plan, $20 a week. Full app access, every session in your calendar, video-led workouts, cancel anytime. I want to make this as low of a barrier to entry to help you get a taste of what quality training can look like. Now, it doesn't come with built-in accountability or coaching. This is for athletes who come batteries included, who know that they need to do it. They just don't exactly know what to do. So if that sounds like you, I'll put the link in the description below. As soon as you check out, you'll have app access. Rock and roll. If you don't like it, you can cancel anytime. I just want to build it to help you thrive in this off season and off seasons to come. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, make sure to hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.